You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording is a special episode in which I got to sit down and have a wide-ranging conversation here at the beginning of Advent with an old friend of our community and author, Diana Butler Bass. In this episode, we discuss her new book that just released called A Beautiful Year, and if you make it to the end of the episode, she may even read a wonderful essay from that book. I hope you all enjoy the episode, and thanks as always for tuning in. Well, welcome to the Way Collective podcast. We are here having a contemplative conversation with author, theologian, and historian Diana Butler Bass. And we're excited to talk about her new book that's recently released, A Beautiful Year. Diana, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. And what a delight to be called a contemplative conversation. I love that.
Indeed. I mean, we're endeavoring in that, right? I'm curious for you, what resonates for you with that word in your work in this time?
Well, the way that contemplation, I think, fits in with this particular project, a beautiful year, is the interesting thread of understanding and experiencing time.
Mm,
And a beautiful year is a introduction to the liturgical year, to think about the cycles of church, the stories of the church. And so it's a structure and it's a practice, to follow the lectionary, to follow the Christian year, paying attention to it. But it's also a set of stories
mm,
that takes us very deeply into the life of Jesus
mm.
over half of the year, and then the life of us, people who are trying to figure out what it means to follow Jesus' teaching, to love God and love our neighbors as ourselves. So that's the essential project of A Beautiful Year, is to get people familiar with a different sense of time.
Mm.
And the I think that contemplation does the same thing.
Yeah.
Basically what we're doing in contemplation meditation is you're taking yourself out of the regular experience of time as something that is, stressful, is full of demands, is something that is occupying your calendar and your attention. And for anywhere, from 5 minutes to half an hour or longer, however you engage in contemplation, you're entering a different kind of space.
Yeah.
And that space is, in effect, a timeless space. I can't even think
Mm.
about the number of times. I mean, time is such a funny word. We use it in so many different ways.
Right.
But I can't even think about how often it's been that I've been in meditation practice when I f- I literally have no idea what time it is.
Right.
And it goes very quickly on
Mm.
occasion, where you think, "Oh my gosh, is that really 40 minutes?
Right.
It's over. How is that even possible?" Or there are those other times in contemplation when you are sitting there for 5 minutes and you think, "When is this going to be over?"
Right. Absolutely.
So this
Mm.
I think this idea of suspending our regular sort of learned experience of linear time
Yeah.
is actually quite important right now.
Yeah. No, I think so too, especially, being subjects under late capitalism, we have a certain association with time, with our work schedules, and um, the lack of kind of like, well, in our tradition's language, the Sabbathing that happens when people are grinding, in the grind culture. And so, I'm curious as I hear you kind of bring up the notion of time as it relates to contemplation, like, how has your own understanding of prayer changed or evolved as you've grown and changed and seen things from new angles? And how has it sort of transformed the way that you engage with time with your work in the world and your schedule?
Prayer of prayer is subject, I think, to one of the things that you were just saying, the consumerist culture. I think
Right.
so many of us, when we're younger, experience the idea of prayer as essentially a transaction with God.
Mm,
And so, in effect, it's the same thing as a financial transaction or a transaction of I give to you in order to get back something back. And so it really functions as almost a quid pro quo
right.
with the divine. And we're taught that, oh, pray for what you want, and if you're faithful, God will give it to you.
Mm,
And so it's a very conditional
mm.
um sort of idea.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's transactional, and it makes us into sort of a consumer of the divine,
Mm,
and that God is essentially kind of the provider. And this
right.
is, I mean, we didn't invent this, of course.
Right.
This is a very ancient idea. You
Jehovah
give
Jireh.
yeah, you give offerings to God, and if you
Yeah.
give the right kind of offering, then God is going to bless you,
Right.
or the gods. And so it's literally all over. Um, it's all over many cultures. But I think that the wisdom traditions within each one of these different religions has said, no, that's not really correct. It is prayer is an entry point into an alternate reality.
Right.
And usually entry that alternate reality is something like you're entering into enlightenment, or you're opening the door so you can find that pathway, or you're entering into divine love, or you're entering into a journey that is taking you deeper
Mm,
within um, what is real. And then prayer can also be an expression of love or hope or intention for the world and for your friends, but it's not like an exchange. It's not like
mm,
if I don't pray for these people, they're not going to get well, or if I do pray for these people, then God is going to fix all their problems.
right.
And so, human beings have a tendency, I think, to commodify and make prayer transactional.
Yeah.
But that at its more profound levels, I think prayer is a pathway into a deeper
Mm,
understanding and experience of what
mm.
is real.
I love that. Yeah, it reminds me of Cynthia Bourgeault, writing on centering prayer. And she says something like, in centering prayer, which is sort of a contemplative form of prayer, we present ourselves as icons of the infinite. And I'm like, wow, infinity has a much different ring to it than time, right? Like, yeah, I remember like Joseph Campbell saying that infinity has nothing to do with time, right? It's that thing which time and thinking cut off. And so maybe like, in this posture that we strike when we're in contemplative prayer, we're tapping in to that infinite wellspring or resource beyond time in order to ground ourselves in time because we can never really escape the flow of time, and yet we have this sort of invitation or this hunger to tap into that depth that is beyond time. And it's, I mean, how vital in a time where our time is commodified and stolen from us all the time.
Yes, isn't that funny with time? We use
Yeah,
it in so many
yeah, all
different
the time.
ways as a word.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I could, I'd like to push a little bit on that.
Do it, do it, do it.
Because I think that time, the problem isn't time itself. Is
Right.
that if we think about physics, if we think about something
Yeah.
you and I share theologically, we think about process theology,
Yep.
that time is simply part of
Real.
it is real. It is part of
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
cosmic
Yeah.
reality that
Flow.
we all live
Yep.
in. And,
Yep. Yep.
that's Albert Einstein pointed
Yep.
this out super clear 100 years ago. And so
Hmm.
you have this, we all live within time and space. And so
Yes.
we never escape
Never
it,
escape it. Totally
eh,
agree. Yep.
because it
Yep.
shapes who we are.
Yes.
What we do, however, is I think that Western culture, and this is part of the argument that's underneath a beautiful year.
Yeah.
In Western culture, we've given into a false notion of time.
Yeah.
And the false notion of time that we hold is that, and you actually said it because we all say this.
Mm.
We talk about the flow of time.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we think about that, if somebody says, well, what do you mean by the flow of time? Oh, well, time, you should think about the old days of our lives, hourglass.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
the sands of our as the sands of the hourglass, so
Right.
the days of our lives. We think
Mm.
of time as a limited commodity
Ah, ah,
that exists primarily in a line.
right, right,
We think of time as a linear,
right,
limited reality.
right.
And
Mm.
that is what our calendars and the history of
Mm.
Western sort of intellectual thought also
Yeah.
teaches. And
Yeah.
that's one of the big marks of Western Christianity. I can actually remember sitting in theology classes as much as 30 or 40 years ago and
Mm.
having someone say something to this effect. And that is the big difference between Eastern and Western religions
Mm.
is that Eastern religions think of time as this sort of circle or wheel. And Western religion thinks of time as a line
Mm.
with a beginning and a middle and an end.
Right.
And that we were taught all those decades ago that linear time is superior to circular time because linear
Right.
time has directionality, it has purpose.
Purpose, telos. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so we think when we approach the Bible, we approach it like the beginning in Genesis and the end in Revelation. And we think of it
Right.
like almost a novel.
Yeah, like Chronos.
Hmm. We really
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the idea of time that we
Mm-hmm.
hold.
Mm.
It is a it's not a very good notion of time.
Mm. Oh, I mean, absolutely. What would you offer up sort of as an alternative when you think more about circular time or Kairos time or like, how would you reframe that for people?
The way that I reframe it in a beautiful year is I introduce them to the actual circularity of Christian time.
Mm.
And that Christian time does that the Christian year does not exist in a calendar framework of 12 months. And think if we think about this, I actually this makes me very excited because where did we get this idea of linear time?
Yeah.
We got it primarily from the ancient world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first wildly successful cultures with a linear sense of time was ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And and we still are living in a calendar that was originally designed some 2000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 12-month cycle. The months are actually still named after Roman gods, Roman festivals, Roman emperors, and Roman numerals. And that Roman linear calendar, it had a start in January,
Yep.
named after the god Janus,
Yep.
who had two faces, and one looked forward and one looked back.
Wow.
And so January is the beginning month of the year where you're saying goodbye to the old year and you're looking forward with anticipation to the new year. That is an idea that we have the whole idea of the ball drop in New York City.
Yeah.
That's essentially an idea that we are still practicing from a festival in ancient Rome.
Mm.
And so then, what is the Roman calendar went through these 12 months named after all these things, and it celebrated primarily three things. It celebrated empire, it celebrated excuse me, it celebrated military victories and military power, and it celebrated transactional economic system.
Wow.
And that is the way that pretty much every person in Western culture, whether you're Christian, whether you're not Christian, that's the calendar that hangs on our walls.
Mm. Mm.
And so for all of our time, all of our lives, that's not a cycle. It's literally like turning a page. People think about it this way. You say, "Oh, well, I'm going to turn the page on the year. I'm
Right.
going to say goodbye to the old year, and now I have the I'm going to have these resolutions and this, that, and the other thing."
Yeah.
But but Christian time is not that. The liturgical year is not that.
Mm.
Christian year in the liturgy is a repeating cycle
Mm.
over essentially 12 months, but
Yep.
you can make the argument that it's really a 13-month cycle because Advent sort of overlaps.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, unlike Roman time, the Christian year starts around November 30th or December 1st. And it starts around those times because it's based on lunar time,
Okay.
not solar time.
Yep.
And so you get this earlier start to the new year, and you're not really saying goodbye to anything
Mm.
at the end at the end of the Christian year. All you're simply doing, it's this very quiet day. It's not like it comes in with ball drops or big
Hmm.
surprises or anything. The
Mm.
the Christian New Year starts by walking into a church and seeing that there's a wreath with a single candle in it.
Mm. Mm.
It actually starts in this incredibly modest moment when in the northern hemisphere the nights are getting longer. This sense of shadow is growing deeper and thicker. And Christians then spend 4 weeks at the quote unquote beginning when the
Mm.
cycle is renewing itself. You spend 4 weeks lighting one more candle each week against the darkness. And
Right.
the questions that emerge in this are questions of: what are we longing for? What are we hoping for? Where is God? Why is justice so slow showing up in the world?
Yeah. Mm.
And that season, then, the first season of the Christian year, there's 6 seasons in the Christian year, not
Mm.
4. That season leads into Christmas,
Mm.
and Christmas lasts 12 days. So by the time you get to January 1st, you've actually already had a season and sort of a half.
Right.
Because Christmas itself is a season. It's a 12-day season. It's the
Mm.
shortest one of the year. And an enormous amount of stuff has already happened.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's mostly about waiting, anticipation, looking for peace, wanting the empires of this world to surrender, in effect, to the love of God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, that begins this whole different process of experiencing a year.
Mm.
And the tyranny of the secular calendar, the Roman calendar, cuts into that on January 1st.
Right.
But we've already been going at it for 5 or 6 weeks.
Totally.
But
I'm so glad you brought that up because I preach the lectionary on Sundays here at our local UCC church in Santa Barbara, and but Advent is my favorite time of year. And there's just something in that womb, of that dark beginning where we start to light those candles that is, I mean, so inherently contemplative, but like you said, it begins to juxtapose, these themes, right? Over like what are we enduring right now? What are our longings right now? Where's our hope being dashed, by current events and administrations, perhaps. And so yeah, I'm just grateful that you brought that up. I think, and I love the juxtaposition of that beginning with the beginning of, the sort of ball drop kind of, as an alternative, right? Is
And it
for
doesn't mean that we shouldn't have fun, on New
oh
Year's Eve.
yeah, sure.
We live in the world, hey, have a
Yeah.
great party. Go I hope you have the best date of your life,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
drink some
Yeah.
great champagne.
Yeah.
That's great. But see,
Yeah.
that's to me, that becomes the magic in a sense
Yeah.
of what it means to truly live a life in the story of Jesus.
Right.
Because there's two calendars. And there's the calendar of that tyranny of imperialism, of militarism and
Mm-hmm.
violence attending it,
Mm-hmm.
and consumerism.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this other calendar. And and in effect, this is very much the reality that Jesus himself experienced when he was alive because he had to live in two calendars.
Yeah.
He lived in the ancient Roman calendar. That was the calendar. It was a calendar of taxation. It was the calendar of the the whole schedule of worship of Rome that interfered with the worship of the people of Israel. It is the calendar that sort of guides the legions of Rome, how they move around, what Rome cares about in terms of the territory they've conquered and the money they're collecting. And so that calendar was very much in effect
Yeah.
in Jesus' day, but he also lived by the Jewish calendar. And so you have the Jesus had this exact same experience, the solar calendar of Roman imperialism and the Jewish calendar that was based around seasons and cycles, um, agricultural seasons and cycles of the moon.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so we have completely neglected that aspect of Christianity.
Yeah.
Catholics kept it, but they really capitulated in very important points to
Mm-hmm.
the Caesar vision of the calendar.
Sure.
And Protestants mostly have ignored it.
Mm, mm. I on that same thread of seasons and agriculture, the natural cycle of things through, our four seasons, as we might refer to them now, seems to have this circle embedded in it, right? This cyclical element that you've named. Like, did that factor in as you were thinking about kind of talking about a beautiful year? Like, how does nature play into the vision of an alternative way of being in time?
The A beautiful year picks up what I would call three major themes. In the same way that the Roman calendar has these three negative themes
Okay.
of imperialism, militarism, and transactional economic system.
Okay.
Uh, the calendar, I think, of Christianity holds within it three proactive, nonviolent themes. And those themes are uh, empire is over. It's an anti-imperial calendar, and I think that Jesus
Birth
taught that.
narratives
Yeah, Jesus taught that his during his entire ministry.
and the
And if you
birth narratives start there, right?
yes, they actually the whole
Yeah.
thing is an anti-imperial
Yeah.
send up, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's one that's probably its strongest thrust is
Yeah.
it speaks directly against Rome.
Yep.
And all empires that will follow after
Mm-hmm.
Rome or that existed before Rome.
Mm.
Um, and then it also has a very strong theme of embracing outsiders. So it's not only that there's going to be the kingdom of God, but which is this anti-imperial kingdom, which is mind-blowing in and of itself.
Mm.
It's such a reversal of the way that people
Yeah.
usually think.
Right.
But that this kingdom is going to be full of a kingdom,
Yep.
in effect, that it will be full of people who are related to one another through friendship with God and the love of God. And so people are called to love God and love their neighbors as themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to respect the dignity of all people, and to set tables where everyone is invited.
Right.
And so, in that way, the year that I present, it has a very strong sort of feminist reading through it because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of my more, I would say, agile theological entry points into the Bible, just as something I know really well.
Mm.
And I'm a woman, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so I love telling a story. But it's also a story about the poor. It's a story about race. It's a story
Right.
about all oppressed people. And
Yep.
so, in that sense, it's this liberation kingdom.
Mm.
And then the third piece of it is it's a story about creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in some ways, I think one of the most interesting parts of the Christian calendar, when you really dive into it and it really becomes part of who you are, is that you understand that Christians were picking up things and borrowing from nearly all of the cultures that they encountered as they moved out of the deep Mediterranean world into especially Northern Europe.
Yeah.
And in doing that, they ran into these harvest festivals, these earth festivals, and they picked up bits and pieces of those and incorporated them into the calendar.
Yeah.
And so they show up in odd and interesting ways. And so there actually is a kind of there's this deep sort of neo pagan.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
if I can say
Bread.
it, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a sort of a panentheist
Mm-hmm.
kind of vibe
Yeah.
that's very present in the calendar as well. And so there's this eco theological, eco
Mm.
spiritual,
Yeah.
very ancient vision of
Mm.
this of the earth's life
Yeah.
that is present in the calendar as well.
That's beautiful. I mean, yeah, we see that in a lot of Celtic Christianity, kind of picking up on that same theme and integrating it or interweaving it into the tapestry of, our Western moving Christian tradition. And so, but I've always been drawn to that. I think, growing up evangelical and just kind of being in more fundamentalist circles as a child, you didn't hear anything about that. There's a lot, the capitulation to colonial Christianity and the ways in which it just sort of mirrors, like you said, the empire was devoid of that. And then there was like, this voice calling in the wilderness within me, I think in my own soul of like, but there's something I'm longing for here that's just not being met with that. And so it's been beautiful to kind of tap into those nature rhythms and also the contemplative stream. I'm curious for you also. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit as a historian, as you looked into the history of this church calendar, and you've already named a lot of elements that I hope a lot of our listeners will be surprised by and really, want to dig into more. What were you surprised by as you kind of did this research on this, and like what stood out for you? Like what most kind of moved you to kind of want to write this?
I didn't really plan on writing
Ah,
this book.
you didn't set out to do a calendar book. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I did not set out to do a calendar book.
Yeah.
Instead, these are things I've just lived. And people ask me
Mm,
all the time, in my travels and, sort of as a writer in public life and speaking all over the place, lots of people ask me, how is it you're still a Christian?
yeah.
Because
Yep.
we all know, that right now being Christian is mostly equated with bigotry, nationalism, a kind of
Right.
militarist warrior Jesus, and some pretty wacko ideas about the end of time. And
Yeah.
there is literally, if there's a PR department for Christianity someplace out in the heavenly universe, they have failed completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people ask me, how is it you're still a Christian? And there's lots of different things, mostly spiritual
Mm,
practices,
mm,
that hold me.
yeah.
And I wouldn't say that hold me to a label, but
Sure.
what they do is they form a set of stories that are the framework of my life. And those stories, living into those stories, and the way those stories shape me as a human being and
Mm,
my imagination,
mm,
um and my practices into the world.
yeah.
Why do I feed hungry people? Well, because Jesus once said, do this for hungry people, and you're doing it for me. And
Yeah.
frankly, I want to give dinner to Jesus, you know
Right. Right.
and so, and that's not the only reason to feed hungry people.
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
me, it is a story that adds richness and depth to a moral practice that we should all be
Mm.
engaged in, no matter what
Hmm.
our faith tradition is
Yeah.
or non-faith tradition.
Right.
And so that's the way Christianity holds me. It's a set of stories that
Mm.
I've learned through
Mm.
spiritual practices, and one of those practices is the Christian year.
Yeah. Mm.
And so I've, with the exception of the 15 years I spent around evangelical churches,
Hmm.
I grew up Methodist, and so the Christian year was there. And then I joined an Episcopal church as a young woman, and the Episcopalians love the Christian year. I
They
mean, this
do that.
is
They do. Yeah.
this is one of their big vibes, and
Right.
so I kind of relearned it, as a young adult, and I loved it. I thought it was
Mm.
really interesting. And so while I'm relearning the Christian year, I'm also studying church history. I'm becoming a church historian. I'm
Right.
getting a seminary degree and a doctorate, and I could see all the connections. I mean, it made sense.
Mm.
And the short and easy version of how this book came to be is during the pandemic, I was trying to think of a way to keep the Christian year without being able to go to church.
Yeah.
And so what I began doing was every single Sunday, I started during the pandemic a newsletter on Substack.
Mm.
And it was at the suggestion of Nadia Boltz-Weber,
Oh
interestingly
yeah.
enough, because I
Hmm.
was feeling really sad and disconnected. And she said she'd recently started this newsletter and it was helping her get through the pandemic.
Wow.
And and so I thought, well, that, if it's helping her, maybe it would help me.
Yeah.
And so I started this newsletter and I didn't know what to write about. And so I thought, I don't know, maybe on Sunday I should write about whatever is in the lectionary.
Mm.
And so I just started writing through the Christian year every Sunday. And now preachers do this
Yeah.
if they're lectionary preachers. They're
Hmm.
preaching through the lectionary every single Sunday, so they're thinking about it.
Yep.
But I'm a layperson. And so I
Right.
mean, I have no reason to open that book up unless I want to.
Yeah.
And so that's what I started doing. I started essentially writing these meditations for every
Mm.
Sunday. And as I went through, I kind of got reconverted to Christianity. I was like, maybe I was on my way out. But then I just started reading these stories
Yeah.
anew
Yeah.
and putting them in this cyclical form. All of a sudden, I was seeing
Right.
things in that those texts that I never saw before.
Mm. Mm.
And I started sharing them, and
Yeah.
boy, did people respond.
Wow.
Oh my
Mm.
gosh. And so before I knew it, I had this really big readership in this
Right.
community. And people would tell me the reason I came is because I wanted to be part of Sunday musings.
Wow.
And so I thought,
Lovely.
this is crazy. I'm
Yeah.
just literally writing about the Christian
Mm.
year. And
Mm.
so
Mm.
that was the genesis of what became this book,
Yeah.
was that I did it first of all to hold on to my own sanity
Right.
when I couldn't go to church.
Hmm.
And as I did it, people were finding, like I was, the stories in ways they'd never heard them before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that created this
Mm.
energy around the Christian year that I never really
Mm.
knew it had.
Yeah, it's fascinating that this period that we all experienced of disconnection, when we were forced to isolate, during the pandemic, yielded this. Well, it sounds like in you retelling your interaction with Nadia too, that there was a longing that you were tapping into, like I'm missing something here, and that in that longing you were able to connect with people in new ways through this re-engagement with the story and with the writing. But what a balm to, that period of isolation to find connection online. Has it can well, I'm just curious as I hear you talk about that, has your writing it through Substack and everything continued to feel that way even as we've come out of this period of isolation post-pandemic?
Yes, and mostly because of the political issues.
Ah,
Um, And I didn't even realize it at first. I mean, I have a lot of good friends who are writers, and so this is not name dropping to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Nadia. I
yeah,
mean, it was really somebody who was important to me, who does work like I do in the world. And she said, maybe you should try this because I think it might help your sanity.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, so
totally.
that was like a huge, beautiful suggestion. And I'm about to say somebody else's name. That's really important. So I want to make sure people know that I don't. That's not a way that I like being in the
Sure,
world, but
sure.
it will help them understand this. Um, so I'm writing these things, and my friends would get them as well as people who just sort of showed up that I
Yeah,
had never met before.
yeah,
And one day I'm sort of talking to Brian McLaren, and he said, the thing I love the most about your newsletter. And I said, what's that, Brian? He said, you're telling the anti-imperial story of God.
right,
And I thought,
right.
I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went back and I looked at my own writing, and I
Mm.
didn't even realize
Wow.
that what I was doing, I didn't sit down and plan to write an anti-empire story
Right,
about
right.
Jesus. It was just coming naturally
Mm-hmm.
as I flowed through the year.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
when I reread it, I went, oh my gosh, you know, so we're in the pandemic, and I
Yeah.
began to realize how angular
Mm.
what I was writing was to what was going on with Trump. Excuse me. And at the end of the Trump presidency,
Yep.
and I just kept it up, through the Biden years, and
Yeah.
the angularity wasn't quite as sharp
Right.
during those years, but I was learning lots about economics,
Yeah.
about environmentalism, and about race in
Yeah.
particular. And the stories just kept speaking in this same
Mm.
sort of vein.
Yeah.
And then when the second Trump election happened, I
Yeah.
was well equipped,
Yeah.
frankly, to be able to theologically walk into the moment.
Right. Right.
And now, almost every day when I open
Mm.
my phone up or look at the
Mm.
news or read something in a newspaper about what's happening, flip on television,
Yeah.
I literally can see the biblical contrast and the contrast with the Christian year so clearly.
Mm. Mm. Oh, I love that. I mean, it's funny how that just sort of naturally was diffused from you, this like anti-imperial kind of like reading of Christianity. And I love that because in our community, many of our folks are post-evangelicals and they've experienced a certain kind of religion. And the hot move, and we're sort of maybe moving away from this culturally a little bit, but is to be spiritual but not religious anymore. And I think that to reclaim religion in the radical notion of that Latin ligare, that where we get our word ligament from, that which binds us together, is so vital. And so we've named like there's like six words that start with C for complicit religion, and it's like confinement, certainty, colonization, conformity, consumption, and coercion are like those are the words that a lot of people associate with religion that's complicit with empire, right? And for Way Collective, we're a community of shared practices and values that try to gather around connection and curiosity and collaboration and creativity and consciousness and compassion. And that's a binding agent too, right? Like that's something that there is a form of Christianity that can be about those, and we could probably both make the argument for why that's actually the Jesus move in the first place. But it's like for us to in our ways, you with your writing and us in our community to try to just walk into this liberative, interconnected, and compassionate form of Christianity is so vital. And yeah, I love that that was what kind of naturally emerged as you were reflecting on your own tradition. Um,
Yeah, and I might add another C to
yeah,
your group's
what
list
bring it on.
because it's like the circularity of time,
Yeah, yeah,
or the
yeah.
cyclical nature of
Well, it's
time.
it's in a circle graphic. I don't know if you can see it right there, but
Oh, oh, there you go.
isn't that
That's
funny? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
wish I had my graphic for the Christian year, which is actually a circle as well.
Oh, lovely.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the I've come to see that the cyclical or the circular notion of time
Mm,
that is present in Christianity isn't hopeless.
right.
So as a matter of
Mm,
fact, it's full of great hope
mm,
and great purposefulness.
right.
Um, and what it's more like than an arrow
Yeah.
that points to the book of Revelation where
Right.
all things are going to end and there's going to be this massive judgment,
Linearity. Yeah.
the linear view of time that
Yep.
you learn. And I spent, like I said, 15 years in evangelical institutions where I went to seminary, it's where I went to college.
Yep. Yep.
People in your town may remember how I was associated with a particular evangelical institution in that town
I think people may. People
for
may
more
remember that.
for more than a few years. And so they also taught this idea of linear time,
Yeah.
and they didn't necessarily do it in its rawest,
Mm,
ickiest forms, but
yeah.
nevertheless, it was certainly present philosophically and theologically.
Right.
But this circular or cyclical notion of time, I've come to think of it more like spirals
Yeah.
or time curves back on itself,
Sure.
or a labyrinth.
Mm,
And in one of the essays in A Beautiful Year it's right at the beginning of the book actually, and it's there very purposefully,
mm.
is that I quote rather extensively from A Wrinkle in Time,
Oh, okay.
because I think that this is what Advent does. Advent introduces us to the folding or the wrinkle, the idea that time is wrinkled, time is not
Mm,
straight. And so there's a great scene. I remember reading that, for the first time when I was probably about 7, 10 years old,
yeah.
when the book was young and I was young. Um,
Yeah.
and Meg, the
Mm,
heroine of the book, her father is missing. There's a rumor he's run away with another woman. The family is devastated, and she is embarrassed, and she's going through adolescence, early stage adolescence, with this deep burden on her. And and I remember feeling just like Meg at the time.
mm,
And so she needs to find her father.
mm.
And these three strangers show up that are sort of these angelic, sort of witchy, wise women.
Yeah.
And they tell her that her father is actually being held a prisoner in
Mm,
this shadowed planet that is very far away, and that
mm,
they can take her there, and her brother and her friend, and that these children will then free him
mm.
from the shadow of hatred. And well, how are we going to get there? And they said, well, we're going to, when they call it tessering, and they say we have to travel through time. Well, we can't travel through that much time. That's really far away. If you travel by a line, it is. And Mrs. Whatsit, I believe in the book, holds up the edge of her skirt, taut, and and there's a in the book there's an actual diagram, and she said if an ant crawls from one side, from my hand here to my hand on the other side, it takes a very long time to make the journey across the edge
Yeah.
of my skirt. And then she says a tesser is like a wrinkle in time, and
Mm,
she brings her two hands together,
hmm.
and all of a sudden that what was a taut line is now a curve,
Yeah.
that and and the ant moves almost instantaneously from one side to the other side.
Mm,
And she says that's what we're going to do with time. And I'm not a physicist, and when I
yeah.
was a kid I read this and I went, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly what the Christian year is trying to do for us.
Mm,
It's
mm.
trying to show us. And in Advent, we're waiting for Jesus to come as a baby who's being born, but Jesus was already born 2,000 years ago. So
Right.
are we waiting for Jesus to come back as the second coming? But when is
Yeah.
that going to happen? And in effect, what Advent does is it takes the linear sense of time and it brings the hands together. And the baby who is born in the manger and the Christ who returns to fulfill the world in total love,
Mm,
it becomes a very short journey.
yeah. Yeah. I love that.
And
Mm,
so that to me is the Christian idea of time.
mm, mm.
Wrinkled, labyrinthine,
Right.
a tesser, a
Yep.
curve, as in the Celtic
Yeah.
patterns of, the beautiful patterns that are all in Celtic art.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
these these are
Yeah.
the things.
Yeah. It seems to me too that in your kind of uplifting that notion, um, it's an invitation to the present moment, right? Because that Christ is always being born, that possibility of love enfleshing itself in us is always available. It reminds me of Meister Eckhart talking about the birth of Christ in the soul is what he's inviting, like there, and that we don't need to look for to the end of time, like some apocalyptic, uh, it's like we could ask you, are you premillennialist or postmillennialist? Is that's very linear, right? Like
Very
the
linear.
old weird way of thinking of things. Instead, rather than looking far down the line, we look right here to the ways in which that circle is present in us and touching us right here and open to us as an invitation.
And
Um,
Bernard of Clairvaux said the same thing, which is
there you go.
very interesting.
Yeah.
That this idea, even in sort of the most hierarchical period of church history, the medieval
Mm,
church, you have these pretty radical voices saying,
yeah.
no. So you have Hildegard of Bingen
Yep.
with her mandalas and her
Yep.
circular music and trying to communicate this. You have Meister Eckhart saying
Yep.
that. And Bernard of Clairvaux said there were actually three comings of Christ. There
Mm,
was the first advent, the birth of Christ,
yeah.
the last advent, which will be the coming of Christ in the future, but then he
Yeah.
talked about the advent of now in the same
Yeah.
way that
Yeah.
Meister Eckhart did.
Love
And
it.
that was the advent of love in our own lives.
Yes.
And that everything in the first and the third advents dissolved into actually the second advent.
Yeah.
And
Love it.
so this kind of vision,
Mm,
see the idea of the circularity of the Christian year, or the cyclical nature of the Christian
yeah.
year, this is not hopeless at all. This
Right.
is this is deep, and it's related to contemplation,
Yeah.
because it's the same move that we experience as individuals in contemplation,
Yep.
that time touches itself.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
time gets bent in contemplation, and we
Yep.
experience time differently as
Yep.
individual people.
Yeah.
The way this happens in community is through the Christian year.
Mm, mm. Love it. Well, I know we're kind of coming to our time here in a little bit, but I have to ask you one other question that's, I hope, related to what you just brought up. But as a philosopher who's primarily interested in beauty, as a transcendental, as, sort of something which us process folks describe in an axiological way as the value of existence. I'm curious, my question is kind of twofold. What led you to choose beauty as part of the title of your book? And for you, what does it mean in its relation not only to the calendar, but to empire? Like, how does beauty offer us an alternative invitation than that of empire? So, twofold. I want to know why you chose it and then how it connects for you with the way you are in the world.
When I was working on this, as I said, that it developed out of actually me going through the 3-year cycle
Yeah.
of the Christian year. And then I realized I'd written like 750, 900 essays
Yeah.
on all of this
That's a
stuff.
lot. Yep.
It
Yep.
was a lot. And I kept thinking, well, how can I turn this into a book? And that meant I had to go back into just tons of material I'd written and pick and
Mm,
choose and rework.
mm.
And so as I was doing it, I thought, well, what is really the theme that's holding this all together? And I
Yeah.
listed three themes: anti-imperial, liberationist, and then the theme of eco theology, or
Yeah.
the created world,
Hmm.
or the created cosmos.
Yeah.
And I kept looking at that, and I thought, well, I could say those three things, but they're all really technical and kind
Right.
of sound boring unless you're kind of a geek and you're into these things.
Yep. Yep.
And so I thought, well, what ties them together? And I thought, oh, it's just, they're just beautiful.
Mm.
This is a beautiful way to live.
Right.
And when I kind of got there, I went, oh my gosh, maybe that's the point of the Christian year. Maybe it's taking us really deeply into the beauty of the
Yeah.
cosmos, the beauty of time, and the
Mm.
beauty of the sacred. And
Mm.
so in the book, I don't tell people about any of these things. Rather, I literally take my readers on a journey through the year.
Mm.
And there are moments of explanatory material that enter into that,
Right.
but it's really something different. And
Mm.
can I
Mm.
close up by just reading one of the shorter essays?
Please, that would be
That gives,
great.
I think
Yeah.
it gives a great way of understanding why beauty also works. And so this is a piece from Advent, and I'm glad that it's one of your favorite sections as well,
Yeah,
because
and it's fast approaching, so it should be really relevant here.
I hope so. And
Yeah.
in recent years, there's been a sort of an innovation that some churches have made with Advent, and that is near the longest night of the year, which is usually around December 20th, December
Yep.
21st.
Yep.
Um, they many churches have inserted a service called Blue Christmas,
Mm.
which is a service that gives people a chance to come into community, into silence, into church, and not celebrate, but
Mm.
instead light candles, to have time of contemplation, and to
Mm.
pray through what has been hard or what has been lost over the year, because lots of
Mm.
people are sad
Yeah,
at this time of the year. Um,
absolutely. Yep.
and so this little essay is called Blue Christmas. And this is a real, this piece, I think, is a very profound illustration of how I approach
Mm.
bringing people into the Christian year.
Great.
My father prized his collection of blue Christmas lights and decorations. It was a particular fancy of his, part rebellion against tradition, a sort of festive statement that my mother ruefully tolerated. Unlike every other house on the block, most of which twinkled with colored lights, our house was covered in blue Christmas lights. Each year, my mother pointed out that a few of the nicest houses had white lights, something she thought elegant and tasteful. But my father ignored her and soldiered on with his blue display. He outlined the azalea bushes with blue lights, the roof line shone blue, and the Japanese maple was decked in blue. One year, he created a massive Christmas tree out of the blue lights and hoisted it up the flagpole while the neighbors cheered and admired his ingenuity. It lasted about 3 days until a freak windstorm took it down. On our door hung a flocked wreath with blue Christmas balls and silver ribbons. When I was quite small, we had an aluminum tree covered in blue and silver ornaments. Eventually, my mother won an indoor victory. By the time my sister was born, we had a quote unquote traditional green artificial tree instead. Somehow she convinced him that the tree should have cheerful multicolored lights and other decorations as a counterpoint to the muted modern display outside. One cold night, just a few days before Christmas, when I was about 7, I stayed outside with Dad as he finished putting up the lights. Night enveloped us as he draped the final strings over the eaves, the brittle blue looking a little like icicles in the moonlight. He came down from the ladder and stood back. Together, we admired his handiwork. Daddy, I asked, why are our lights blue? It started to snow very lightly. He took my hand. Because it is peaceful, he said. and it looks pretty when it snows. We stood in silence. He was right.
Mm. It's lovely.
And that's the way that I do it.
Yeah.
I I'm not being didactic here.
Right.
I am literally opening windows to see the layeredness of time,
Mm.
to see the beauty
Mm.
that was all around my father and I, and
Yeah.
also to see the tenderness
Yep.
of a father taking his young daughter's hand. And he's doing it as a sort of countercultural move.
Yeah.
And I just love that story. And
Mm.
and sometimes I talk more directly about the Bible, but I use an awful lot of stories about friendship and love and
Mm.
growing up in the 1960s and
Yeah.
early 1970s to try to make these points and get people to understand the complexity of time
Mm.
and how the past and the present still touch.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's so layered, right? The way you set the scene and, and you paint that picture and the softness with which the essay ends and the way you read it even, I think was reflective of, the imagery kind of pointing toward that soft moment of reflection. And so thanks again for offering your wisdom and your beauty. And so how can we keep up with you? Like, how can people find you on Substack? What's the best way for them to follow along?
My Substack is called The Cottage, and I'm still writing away, even essays that aren't in a beautiful year, because I wrote new material for the book that hadn't appeared in The Cottage before, and I still continue to write new material. And occasionally, I pick up something I wrote for the book and just rerun it so that people can remember pieces that they loved if they might have read them in
Mm.
the past. So I'm having a lot of fun right now. I'm going to be writing as we're recording right before the end of the Christian year. The last Sunday of the Christian year is called Christ the King. I'm going to
Yep.
preach a sermon this next week, and it's called Christ the No King.
Ah, Christ the
Christ
Kin.
yeah, Christ's vision of no kings.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it.
And so that will show up in the cottage this week,
Cool.
and then I'll spin into Advent, and it just it keeps going, and it's
Mm.
I don't know how long I'm going to continue doing it, but
Yeah.
I know I've got at least a few more years left in me
Yeah, indeed.
to
Well,
tell these stories, and we have a
yeah,
lot of empire to fight.
we do. Well, thank
So
you for continuing on in the good work. Um, and thanks for being with us today as well.
well, thank you. I hope people will join me at the cottage, and hey, I hope to see you in Santa Barbara sometime in the
I
near
hope so too. Let's make it happen.
I would love that.
All right. Thanks, Diana. Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace in every good, y'all.